Result, the actions of corporations ought to be held to the same moral standards as the actions of individuals. Merriam-Webster defines hold to as make liable or accountable or bound to an obligation or hold to your promise. The only usage is both transitive and includes preposition to. This focuses throughout on actors because things like binding, liability, and obligation make very little sense when the action is the object. Therefore, the corporation and individuals are the sources of the action in the resolution. Absolutely permissive moral standards are still moral standards. If corporations shouldn't be impeded, that doesn't mean they're held to no standards at all. There's a verb phrase that lists at the end of the resolution. The omitted words are ought to be held to. Wikipedia explains the reason in the form of an example. John can play the guitar and Mary can too means John can play the guitar and Mary can play the guitar too. Therefore, the correct way to interpret the ellipsis is to repeat the former verb phrase, not to create an entirely new meaning based for the sentence based on another verb phrase. This makes arguments which prove individuals ought not be held to moral standards either aft-ground or inconsequential to the resolution, and arguments that rely on which standards individuals are held to unimportant. In other words, the resolution could already take into account that individuals aren't prohibited from actions and thus has no bearing on how standards are today. I value the proper application of standards, which is suggested by morals and ought, and the evaluative term of the resolution, meaning morally acceptable, making only impacts to the status of morality important. It is unimportant if it is good that it be held only moral. All moral standards are moral. If they were immoral, it would end in nonsense. Therefore, there is one set of moral standards, all of which are moral. This means that there exists one overarching morality which dictates standards, and subsets differ based on characteristics of actors, not on different moral philosophy. Freedom is the deciding characteristic, the criterion for whether corporations ought to be held to the same subset as individuals. Holding to a standard has always been conditioned by freedom of action. In addition to our history, everyday actions tend to substantiate this claim. We grow densely angry with the murderer, even enough to kill him ourselves, but few would devote much time or effort to exacting revenge from a landslide. Furthermore, if morality is worth discussing, then it must be produced contingently through our perception of freedom. Otherwise, it is lofty and out of control. If neither corporations nor individuals possess a certain level of freedom, the moral standards they are held to must reflect this. These moral standards do not assign blame and show the characteristic of being different from every other set of moral standards that reflect minimal freedom. God, whose will is free, would be subject to different moral standards. My argument is that individuals and corporations have the same amount of freedom with regard to their wills. That suggests that we overestimate the freedom of individuals to decide their own wills, that individuals aren't free with regard to their actions, and that additionally corporations share this unfreedom. There are several reasons the two actors should be held to the same standards. One, if individuals make up corporations, freedom isn't spontaneously created because government grants them the right to exist as a legal person, meaning that if individuals aren't free, neither are corporate ones. They are also not free prima facie since they are entirely dependent on the government for both status and privileges. 2. Corporate structure minimizes freedom. At best, corporate unfreedom reflects the will that ends up dominating, parallel to the process of will formation by individuals, which is an internal decision structure also with competing interests called motives. Arthur Schopenhauer explains. The ability to deliberate yields in reality nothing but the distressing conflict of motives dominated by indecision. The whole soul of man is its battlefield. The conflict makes the motives try out against each other, their effectiveness on the will. This puts to the will that the same situation as that of a body on which different forces act in opposite directions, until finally the decidedly strongest motive drives the others from the field and determines the will. This outcome is called resolve, and it takes place with complete necessity as a result of the struggle. Individual and corporate decision-making structures are the same, an amalgam of different motivations. The fragmentation involved in individual desire make the notions that individuals act as an undivided agent impossible, and cements that individuals and corporations make decisions in the same way. There is nothing uniquely important, and that the decision happens between people prescribed by corporate policy and within the individual. 3. Since all actions show the characteristic of being unfree, we could call the actors similar accordingly. As such, proof that the idea of freedom is unknowable in general means that freedom is unknowable for both corporations and individuals. As a result, regardless of which level of freedom we assign to individuals, corporate freedom moves with it, making them unfree in the same way and thus accountable to the same moral standard. 4. A positive level of freedom cannot be proven. Schopenhauer suggests that we could never arrive by examination at the freedom we pretend the subject has, so we ought to presume that individuals and consequently corporations are not free. Free means accordance with one will. Consequently, to ask this will itself is free is to ask whether the will is in accordance with itself. This says nothing. Freedom signifies I am free when I can do what I will. Here in the phrase I will what I will, the freedom is already affirmed, but we can now inquire about the freedom of the willing itself. The question would take this form. Can you also will your volitions as if a volition depended on another volition which lay behind it? Suppose that this answer is answered in the affirmative. What then? We would be pushed back indefinitely since we would think that a volition depended on previous deeper-lying volition. In vain would we try to arrive at this way in a volition which we would accept as dependent on nothing else. 5. The idea of free will and the set of standards and entails are unjustifiable for several reasons. A. The idea of free will requires that we believe that lies in every feeling and action are independent of all others, which is manifestly untrue. Friedrich Nietzsche writes. We believe at bottom all sensations and actions are acts of free will, and the sentient individual observes itself and regards every sensation, every change as something isolated, unconditioned, disconnected. We are hungry, but we do not think the organism wants to sustain itself. This feeling seems to be asserting itself without cause or purpose. It isolates itself and considers itself willful. Thus, belief in freedom as of will is a primary error committed by everything organic, as old as the impulse teleological itself. Belief in unconditioned substances is likewise a primary ancient error committed by everything organic. B. Even if people are free, punishing wrongdoers who acted out of freedom of their will is unjustifiable, meaning that corporations and individuals, regardless of their level of freedom, ought to be held to the same standard. standards, those moral standards that do not punish. Nietzsche furthers. If someone is punished, he is punished for having preferred the worst reasons to the better. He must have therefore known where this knowledge is lacking. A man is unfree and not responsible. If he did not see the better reasons perhaps from dull-wittedness, it is not usual to punish him who he lacked the capacity to choose the act as an animal would for an offense to be punishable, presupposes the perpetrator intentionally acted contrary to the better dictates of intelligence. But how can anyone intentionally be less intelligent than he has to be? Whence comes the decision when the scales are weighted with the good and bad motives, not from error, from blindness, neither from an external or internal compulsion. The intelligence is not the cause because they do not decide against the better reasons. And here one calls free will to one's aid is pure willfulness, which is supposed to decide, and impulse is supposed to enter, which the motive creates no part, in which deed arising out of nothing occurs. If this supposed willfulness in a case which willfulness ought not to reign, which is punished, the rational intelligence which knows law, prohibition, and command ought to have permitted no choice and not to have the effect of compulsion and a higher power. Thus the offender is punished because he employs free will, because he acted without a reason when he ought to have acted in accordance with reasons why. But it's precisely this question which you no longer even ask. It was a deed without a full reason, something which purposeless and non-rational, but such a deed too ought, in accordance with the first condition of all punishability laid down above, not be punished. The offender certainly preferred the worst reasons to the better, but without reason or intention. He certainly failed to employ his intelligence, for not for the purpose of employing it, for that you affirm.
What's the argument on the top about the ellipsis?
Just that the first verb phrase in the resolution is the second phrase, or the part of the first verb phrase that makes sense at the end.
So can you just say the whole resolution?
The actions of corporations ought to be held to the same moral standards as the actions of individuals ought to be held to.
Oh, okay. So what does that get you other than...
The argument right there is what it gets me, right? Like it gets out of what they are held to right now,
okay.
Or arguments that say individuals shouldn't be held, or short, something like that.
So is the argument that since no actions are free, we hold no one to moral standards?
The argument is that the actions of corporations and the actions of individuals aren't free, and so we should hold them to the same standards.
Of
what?
What do the standards mean?
Those standards which don't punish, those standards which bind but not bind actions that are relevant.
How do you bind without punishing? Or more importantly, how do you hold, which means make liable or accountable to, without punishing?
They could first be actions that no one would take, so it's not important that they exist, and then it wouldn't cause a harm. Or second, they could be the things that they are bound to as if by an obligation, but not the same things to say they are punished if they don't follow. So
then how can you argue they're bound? Or at least rather, how can you argue that they can be made liable or accountable to that?
We can call someone accountable to something even if we don't.
Right, but the way you define hold is to make liable or accountable, i.e. like a proactive way of making them liable or accountable. That would necessitate some sort of action, right?
I don't understand why just to say that you are accountable to an obligation.
Because we're not just saying you are accountable. Your definition of hold
that's the same thing
as
to make accountable to an obligation. If I say you are accountable to an obligation, you are.
Why doesn't that mean that that's actually bringing them to account for their obligation? For instance, if I were to hold you accountable for your obligation to read an AC, right, I would enforce that somehow.
Sure.
Okay, so that means that in order to hold you to your obligation to read an AC, I would have to punish you if you didn't.
I don't think punishment is entailed at all. I don't think that makes sense. It could be
So
just that we are constrained
to
do this.
The value is a proper application of standards, but the implicit value of that is morality, right?
Because the proper application of standards is what's required, and I don't think that morality is a lofty ideal is what's required. Right? I'm not asked to prove this is moral, but rather that
that's not my argument. My argument is simply, though, that the proper application of standards, those are moral standards.
I don't really think it even makes a judgment about morality. I think it just says, within the scope of morality, this is what is proper.
So why would we look to that if that's not what we should look to?
What?
So yes, so you implicitly value morality, correct?
If
the rest of your case follows under the idea that in a moral system we would properly assign standards, you implicitly value morality, right?
I don't think I'm saying morality is good. I don't understand.
I'm not saying you're saying morality is good.
I don't understand what implicit valuing is.
The
implicit value is the only thing.
The premise of the AC is that it would be moral to affirm the resolution. Because in a moral system, you properly assign standards, correct?
I think the second part of that is true. I don't understand why the first part is following from that, but maybe it is.
There's going to be NC of an AC.
Give me a second.
Is everybody ready? You don't need that many pens.
Right.
It's only 7 minutes.
Go ahead.
I negate the resolution result. The actions of corporations ought to be held to the same moral standards as the actions of individuals. Observation 1, the role of the ballot. The function of the ballot must be to evaluate the language of the affirmative advocacy. Language is important. It's the way in which we construct meaning and value. PhD Helen Haste argues. Communitarian thinkers emphasize the primacy of language and social interaction and generation of meaning. Human life is fundamentally dialogic. We become full human agents capable of understanding ourselves and hence defining identity through acquisition of rich human languages of expression. If social interaction is crucible of meaning, then the child learns about morality through discourse and social practices. The meaning of something, including the meaning of our own identity and morality, depends on what is comprehensible and recognized within our social community. Social beings create their identity through shared discourse and language. As Haste argues, the pedagogy of morality is dependent on discourse and language. Thus, in order for a moral evaluation to have meaning and deserve an endorsement, it must be free from language that is counterproductive to morality's end aims. For instance, it would be absurd to endorse potentially moral hate crime laws if the language used to refer to various groups were racial epithets and slurs. This also means that harms with respect to the use of certain language must precede the value criterion structure, insofar as the structure is only morally relevant if supported by proper discourse. If I win that the rhetoric of the affirmative is, in fact, harmful to pursuit of morality, I should win the debate. Observation 2, the value inclusive counter-advocacy. The text of the negative counter-advocacy is that the actions of corporations ought to be held to the same moral standards as the actions of persons. The negative recognizes the harmful implications of the word individual and instead embraces the positive connotations of the word persons. Subpoint A. The counter-advocacy solves 100%. The affirmative, the negative simply replaces the word individuals with persons and captures every argument outlined in the AC. B. The counter-advocacy is net beneficial. It solves the affirmative by avoiding the discursive use of the term individual. The decision calculus to evaluate the debate is simple. The affirmative must win offense to the use of the term individual to win the debate. Any do both permutations still links. Any permutation to do the Vic is a separate permanent choice negative ground. Observation 3, individuals versus persons. Yes, there is a difference, and yes, I have evidence and analysis to prove this distinction. Subpoint A. Unlike the word person, the word individual abstracts a person in a dehumanizing manner that is contrary to the end of morality. Professor of law and sociology emeritus UC Berkeley Philip Sullivan writes. In Western philosophy, person as a term of art has reappeared permanently since ancient times. The idea persists because there is a core of meaning which it seems indispensable to moral thought and judgment. Many analysts of Western thought have found it to help people to distinguish between individual and person. That is so because in the doctrines of modernity, individuals tend to lose their distinctiveness, to become interchangeable, ahistorical units within a political, legal, or economic scheme of things. The driving ideals of liberal capitalism all have the effect of identifying people by general categories rather than by concreteness of selfhood, connection, and context. As the category is abstract, so too is the individual, hence the phrase abstract individual. This abstraction is one of the more barren and dehumanizing legacies of modern rationalism. Subpoint B. The word person recognizes each person's ground project, which constitutes his or her meaning for life, and insulates a person against sacrifice for the greater good, thus proving the comparative superiority of the word. Sullivan continues. The lessons that our understanding of personhood should give full weight to self-affirming participation in the moral order. Respect for individuals as persons requires that we regard and act towards them in their concrete specificity, that we take full account of their specific aims and purposes into their own definitions of social institutions. In other words, the person as an object of moral concern can never be an abstraction, never wholly subordinate to social needs. The moral unity of the person is a counterweight to the demands of sacrifice to the common good. As Bernard Williams has argued, there can come a point at which it is quite unreasonable for a person to give up in the name of impartial good ordering a world of moral agents, something which is a condition of his or her having any interest in being around at the world at all. This is something that Williams calls a ground project, that is the set of activities and movements that taken together construct a moral identity and give meaning to life. But this is the autonomy of selfhood, not the unfettered or ungoverned choice. An unspoken condition of moral individuality is that ground projects must be the threshold or standard of moral justification. Each project or way of life is unique, but this does not mean that all are acceptable. Persons are once socially constituted and self-determining. To be socially constituted is not in itself to be imprisoned or expressed. It does not require that people or puppets act out prescribed rules in excruciating detail, nor is self-determination properly understood as a gratification of impulse, compulsive dependency, or opportunistic decision. Insofar as it has moral import, the theory of the social self makes it plain that a morally competent self must be part of affirmative social participation and of responsible motion, belief, and conduct. Sullivan concludes. To many observers, conservatives as well as progressive, the individual and individualism have taken on connotations that are deeply offensive from a moral point of view. The image of the self-distancing individual is hardly convincing or attractive picture of what participation in the moral order should entail. When the human being is abstracted from history and context, we lose purchase of what it means to be a multidimensional moral actor and fully realized object of moral concern. In short, the texture of the moral ordering is lost. The concept of person is an effort to achieve that texture. The individual as a person is discovered, protected, and fulfilled only within a specific historical setting. This particularly resists and mitigates the abstraction. Yet the point of the exercise is to vindicate a general idea, human dignity and worth. In etymology and social theory, person suggests particularly coherence and responsibility. The Latin and Greek terms persona and prosopon refer to the mask used in classical drama and by extension the part or character represented by the actor. This identification of the person with the role takes on the ethical meaning. It is the duty of the person, moral person to play the role the roles they are assigned. Observation 4, solvency. The Vic captures all the affirmative solvency, and so as the action taken is fundamentally the same. The difference lies in the language embraced by each advocacy. The affirmative embrace self-denying abstraction and encapsulating the term individual, while the negative endorses the word person, which is an empowering reminder of our self-determination and moral authority. Since there is zero solvency deficit between the EC and the Vic, the Viva risk of the impacts outlined above justify a negative ballot. Finally, even if the role of the ballot is not to evaluate the language of each advocacy and I were to kick out of the Vic still functions as a case turn in that it proves that the rhetoric of an individual undermines self-realization or required for moral judgment. This independently de-justifies the affirmative as unique reason to vote negative. Finally, although I encourage and hope hope for a substantive debate on this issue, the following are simply preemptive arguments to the most likely apt strategy. First, several permutations are illegitimate. One is to shift an advocacy allows the apt to spike out of any of the flaws in their advocacy and make it impossible for the neg to win. Two, destroys predictability. The pre-round preemptive decisions are based on the rhetorical artifact of the ACN resolution. Issue remains static. Three, the affirmative conditionality. The apt can conditionally advocate parts of its standard or resolution, erasing turn and critique ground. Four, destroys class strategic thinking. Debate will be on evasions of argumentation. Five, time and strategy skew. Allowing the severance perms takes all the time the neg spent developing the net benefit, and the firm can just test their way out of it. This increases the outside bias is akin to doubling 1 AR speech time. Six, all of the above are voting issues to preserve competitive equity in education. Any theory should be balanced to maintain a fair and balanced playing field between affirmative and negative ground. Error negative on theory, given the penchant of apt to use preclusionary and a priori arguments. The role of the judge is to make the process most educational and fair. And finally, value inclusive counter-advocacies are good. One, VICs are crucial near the debate so that every word is tested. Only VICs reduce the size of the debate and focus on each word the affirmative uses in the rhetorical artifact that is the EC. Two, my impact would outweigh. A, I have framework evidence that proves the argument is uniquely predictable, and the evidence frames the argument to prove the importance of language in the effective word choice. This proves that the VIC is uniquely predictable in philosophical literature, and my haste and cells-like evidence indicates that focus on word choice and language is important, and not only questions the term individual and its negative implications, but it is comparative as it describes the superiority of the alternative word choice persons. B, education. My internal link to education claims are bigger and more unique than your friend of argument. My haste evidence indicates the core question of your ballot is to refocus the debate, and yes, this is a defense of VICs. You should be prepared to defend your own words given the infinite prep time for the affirmative. Three, negative interpretation. VICs are allowed only if they meet three tests. A, the negative gets one unconditional VIC. Two, B, the negative gets the evidence to prove, has evidence to prove a net benefit. This allows the affirmative to straight term the VIC, but still allows the negative flexibility to question the AC. And C, the VIC must be textually competitive. Textually competitive VICs are uniquely good. The affirmative has to defend the words they use in their cases. Let's go to the ACE. Look at the top where the held is an active verb. The idea of holding or making someone liable or accountable for something necessitates that action is taken to ensure that they are held to those standards. It's not the same as just like regarding something as liable or accountable, or regarding as if like moral standards would apply. It's holding them to them. At that point, the case doesn't meet because no punishment is taken. Next, you look to ought. Ought is, it means usage justifiability. That's Merriam-Webster. I think he agrees that ought means what should be done. So the VIC gets ground. Look to the value. The implication is the implicated value is morality. Insofar, the proper application of standards is only relevant in a moral system. And finally, it says all moral standards are moral. But even if they're all moral, that doesn't mean they all apply in this case. It doesn't mean that like even given the actors, even if they don't have free will, that different moral standards wouldn't apply.
Just repeat the last argument.
The last argument is, okay, so even if you're right, and there is no freedom of action, so we look to moral standards that don't punish, there is no reason why, even if all those standards are moral, they would apply to all actors, right? There are different actors, so.
Does it suggest the opposite?
No.
It just suggests this might not be true.
No, it suggests that you're not meeting the threshold to affirm.
Okay, where's the threshold to affirm argument?
You would have, like that's the argument, you would have to show that not only are they both not free in their actions, but that the nature of
The
them...
standards is the same?
What?
Like
Yeah.
the nature of them requires the
Would
same.
require the same moral standards, not that all moral standards are moral.
Okay.
Just circular.
Is there a harm from calling human beings individuals?
Yes.
Two human beings?
Two human beings. I mean, to a general moral order, I would argue. I mean, you can articulate that in terms of the human being, but I think there's a harm to using the word individual in terms of a moral order.
Okay. Haste is the argument at the top about dialogue.
Right.
Can you read the sentence about how children pick up language practices?
Yeah, through morality when we get to it. The whole sentence?
Yeah.
If social interaction is a crucible of meaning, then the child learns about morality through discourse of social practices.
Okay, insofar as we are no longer children, and we are no longer then learning about morality via haste, why does the criticism matter?
Because one, I don't think there's a bright line for what children are. I think we're all here immature in some level, and we're not old, wise men that have understood morality to its complexity. But even if that weren't true, the argument is simply that the connotations of the word individual are already set. So that argument helps me. Because we're not children anymore, you can't redefine that term in this round to mean something else to us. Right?
Okay.
So you can't say, like, I deconstruct the word, because we already think it means something
Can
else.
you win without winning the net disadvantage to, like, individuals? Can you win if you just win person good?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to compare at all to whether individual is good or not.
No, what do you mean? If I just went person good, no, I'm going to go for both.
You have
that
to win
individuals
individual
is
bad, person good, right?
No, but if I win individual bad, I still win. If I win person good, I don't win.
Okay.
Because it's still a budget case.
The second answer to the AC is just, I get ground.
The second answer to the AC, the ought argument?
Yeah.
That just gives me ground because
That's not
ought means
like-
advisability.
That's not negate here, that's just the link.
No, that's just a link to give me ground to run a case.
So the two links are, one, morality in a moral system, and two, the VIC
comes through on.
No, the implicit value of morality in your case means that I turn your case should I lose the VIC. Like if you win that I can't run a VIC, I can still apply the net benefit as a case turn.
You're not going to go for offense from the preempts at the bottom, right? Unless I run crazy stuff.
What do you mean? The offense from like this?
You're not going to say I win the round as a result of all these preempts.
Unless you sever out of the word individuals and say,
what is severing?
You say, oh, I don't advocate the use of the word individual anymore. Let's still affirm based on the idea of the AC.
Did I ever say I advocate?
No, because that's why it's preemptive.
Okay. AC first. Here's stuff. Ready? He says held is active. Action's not the same as regarding them the same. Regarding is also an active verb, and regarding is what I'm advocating. So I'm still meeting the standard he's giving me, which means I'm not linking to this argument. The first argument just isn't true on that level. 2, I don't need to win that argument insofar as he's not showing you that there's a harm to not winning it. There's no impact articulated in C. The second and third arguments are just reasons that either the counterplan links or that the counterplan turns the AC, so we'll deal with that on there. Then go to the argument about even if they all apply doesn't mean punishes the same thing. However, that's not the total of the argument. That only responds to 5b. So you can extend to number 2. The structure of freedom is such that individuals and corporations are the same. Individuals and corporations are the same because they deliberate in the same way. That is, they are acted upon by things that are called motives, which means that individuals are not the same. Which means that individuals are not free with regard to their will, but rather their will action happens as a complete necessity of the motives. Which means that individuals are not free, even if the counterplan includes the clause that individuals are free. This is showing they are unfree in a different way than they are socially conditioned. They are conditioned by their own minds, which means that individuals are not free. That's never articulated as not enough reason to believe that individuals aren't free. Individuals aren't free, corporations aren't free, therefore they ought to be held to the same standards, those standards which are absolutely permissive. You can extend that argument from above the top. Absolutely permissive standards are still moral standards, so I'm still holding them to those. So that's if you're going to vote. That's for why you're going to a vote affirmative. Let's go why you don't negate. Go to haste. The first is if individuals are not responsible, insofar as I didn't choose to use individual in the resolution, rather the resolution contains individual for me, then there's no reason to punish me. Either I am responsible because I have chosen, or I am not responsible because I have chosen, and then there's no harm to harming the moral system because those who are treated as individuals are also not morally responsible. So either the counterplan isn't true, individual doesn't have a harm to a moral system, or the critique isn't true and I don't link. That's the double bind David's in. Then go to haste, sorry. First, it's useless to try to change morality now. Haste claims that we form morality as children. Even if we start going around talking about people as persons, we still believe them as individuals, which means that we're still viewing them in the same way. That means David links too. I'm not convinced, and the judges aren't children, which means that there's no actual benefit to negating either, which means the counterplan isn't enough to negate. That answers also the claim that it turns the AC. Then, we could never claim that a word has inherent context, because remember, his evidence says that within the liberal, multiculturalist, and Western idea, this is what individual means, but that's not how I'm using it. I'm reading Nietzsche, who directly responds to that. Moreover, I'm reading Schopenhauer, who disagreed with almost everyone. So, clearly individuals are not the same thing as they are in the Western liberal culture. Surely Nietzsche is not a liberal. So, as a result of that, I am reading something that is not the same thing as to say individuals within the sense that he's advocating individuals mean. This is enough to affirm the resolution, remember, because I'm getting out of the harms, which means I'm capturing the benefit. Then, go to person. There's no reason to believe that because it was used in Greece one way, that it is also an advantage for David. Just because it was used in Greece one way 2,000 years ago doesn't mean that it's used in English right now. We could say that there are abstract persons, and certainly we talk about persons in order to abstract from gender. He, she turns into persons, so it could still be abstraction, which means David's linking into his own argument. Remember, this isn't responsive to any of the theory of the bottom, nor is it severing. It's arguing that he links, which doesn't turn the critique. It argues that there's no net advantage. If there's no net advantage, there's no reason to vote for it. Then, it doesn't turn the AC insofar as the AC doesn't rely on this. They are not free and therefore ought to be held to the same moral standards. No proof within the resolution relies on winning that, so it doesn't turn the AC. Moreover, I'm not advocating something as moral, just that it logically follows, which is what is in the 1AC, that it is a proper placement, not that it is moral.
mischaracterizes my argument at the top of the case. I'm not saying that regarding is a passive verb, not an active one. I'm saying that hold is not equivalent to regard, insofar as hold connotates some sort of action that is a lot more than just regarding something as X. Insofar as the definition is to make liable or accountable, he concedes that the verb make and not just regard changes the definition, and therefore the implication I gave you in the last speech was that you don't affirm because he's not meeting the definition of hold. I articulated that impact in the last speech. This becomes the first negative voter, easiest way out of the round because you don't have to evaluate all the big stuff, insofar as he's not affirming the resolution. All right, let's go down to the, but I mean, I'm arguing you're going to evaluate the big stuff first. But let's go to the extension about individual corporations aren't deliberate in the same way, individuals aren't free. Remember, he's not responsive to my argument is he's reduced the set of moral standards to a group of moral standards that do not require punishment, but rather are the specific set of moral standards that only apply to actors that aren't free. He hasn't proven that there aren't other situations, for instance, context, that would necessitate different moral standards being applied in different situations. He makes the logical assumption that if there are certain set of moral standards, they must apply in every context just because the agents are the same. Insofar as that's a logical gap, he's not proving the or he's not affirming the resolution, which means that the second reason to vote negative, he's mischaracterized my argument again in that position, which means that there's nothing he can say in the 2AR to get out of these two arguments on his case. Let's go to the Vic. Remember, he's going to get up and saying, I'm being disingenuous insofar as I said you could look at those two arguments first when I say the Vic comes first. Remember, I say the Vic comes before his value criterion. The problem with this case so far at this term is that everyone thinks it's a language and discourse critique. That's not what it is. The argument is a value-inclusive counterplan. Think policy, pick, plan-inclusive counterplan. If he had a plan, I would remove one word and advocate that. It's not the same thing he's doing, therefore it's competitive, therefore it's my ground because it gets out of something in the resolution. Remember, all of my impacts happen at the theoretical debate level. Insofar as he says things would happen, like people are like things would happen if you affirm, I'm saying things would happen if you negate, not that his use or my use of the word in this round has affected you in some way. That gets me out of the argument that you judges aren't children, because it doesn't matter who you are. But even if that's true, that only feeds my argument, because my argument is you can't change your conception of what the word individual means since you've heard it so many times since you were children in that Western liberal context. Guess what? That also gets me out of the Nietzsche argument insofar as you have a connotation of the word individual, being that given that you've read a lot of Western literature and grew up in a Western society, a Western liberal society, a capitalist one in particular, that means the connotation still exists if you want to make that argument. And furthermore, insofar as he's affirming like globally or whatever, it would still happen in that part of the world. That still makes it a net benefit not to affirm. All right. That answered the change than possible. Next, he says that there's no claim, right, the Nietzsche stuff, already answered that. Secondly, I would argue on the Nietzsche thing, even if that's not true, remember the AC still uses the word individuals in its analysis, so it's not Nietzsche saying the word individual. That means that he still links into the discourse argument. Next, he says, yeah, all right, got it. All right, go down to the B subpoint. Actually, sorry, go to the Vic. Extend across the Vic. The text is simply, the actions of corporations ought to be held to the same moral standards as the actions of persons. He concedes that I have all the ground to run this, extend the argument that the Vic is necessary to check the aft back. Insofar as they have infinite prep time, I need to be able to link directly into the resolution, but lucky me, like it's directly in his case too, so that doesn't matter. Sorry to jump, but I just realized at the very top he said he didn't choose to affirm the resolution in the double line. That's where I want you to cross-apply that I have comparative evidence on the net benefit, which he concedes makes the Vic predictable, which means that he should have evidence that says individuals is a uniquely good term. Furthermore, he concedes the burden I placed in observation 2, which is that the affirmative burden, this is in subpoint B, is to provide evidence that the word individual has a positive connotation. Insofar he hasn't done that or tried to do that in the last speech, there is nothing he could do in the 2AR and no reinterpretation of his evidence insofar as he thinks his evidence doesn't talk about individuals in that way to meet that burden. At that point, that's the third reason you can vote negative, is he's not meeting the burden I placed on him. All right. So we extended the Vic. I've explained to you why it doesn't matter if he didn't choose to use resolution. He has it in his case. There's no, okay, now the double bind. He says there's no harm because people aren't morally responsible. But remember, this is going to come through the Selznick extension. People have ground projects. The idea that individuals have this core set of beliefs that give them meaning to life, whether or not they chose that core set of beliefs is irrelevant. The term individual abstracts them from that core set of belief and does not allow for a moral ordering or a moral system because it doesn't treat people as if they have a conception of morality, which I'm not going to say, like he's not going to argue people don't have a conception of morality, even if they don't choose to have what their conception is. All of you sitting at this table have a conception of what is right or wrong. That would prove his argument untrue if he were to argue that you have no decision whatsoever in terms of morality, even if you didn't choose what you think is right or wrong. The term individual abstracts that from you. All right. Let's go to the Selznick, the last part. He says it doesn't matter because the Greeks used it to refer to the little mask and drum. Remember, it does matter as far as the etymology of the word persons comes from persona or prosopon, which refers to that mask and has ethical implications. This is the warrant for why the connotation of person is good extended across. It recognizes that individuals have their own role in life that they should play out, and recognize that they have a specific historical setting and context. All right, so let's go to the observation 4. Remember, extend across that I saw 100%. Of the AC insofar as I can do functionally the same thing he does, which is recognize the functional action of the resolution is true while using different language. Insofar as there's any inch of a doubt, there's a link in your mind to these impacts, that means that you vote negative because it solves 100% of the AC. There's no deficit from that way. All right, so he says I link into myself because persons too abstractly. Remember, there's no specificity here. He doesn't tell you why that links me in or why that's specific in the same way that individuals abstract people, i.e. from a social context and a historical setting, and denies them ground projects like Selznick does. He just makes the assertion that we use individuals to abstract ourselves from gender, but there's no reason why that uniquely is bad. I say the term individual abstract ourselves from morality, thus unigate.
Start on the whatever it is. Ready? Every use of individual within the AC is not in a Western mindset. It's in agreement with Nietzsche's mindset, which means there is no reason to believe that I link to the criticism. This leaves you with zero risk of a link. There's no reason in the NR why I'm specifically linking. Moreover, there's no reason why Nietzsche is a liberal. I'm advocating Nietzsche, at least in the 1AC and the 1AR, which is all I need to do to get out of the counterpoint. Then go to his argument. This is where he's losing. Go to the argument about persons. He says the etymology determines that they have ethics, and that means it's good. I told you that it's used completely different nowadays. It is used to abstract from concrete struggles like gender struggles. This is clarified when he asks me about it, so he knew what the argument was, that it abstracts from concrete struggles, which means that it abstracts individuals in the exact same ways Selznick talks about abstracting individuals. That is from specific historical situations and from their life work. As a result, person is just as bad. Remember, he needs an alternative that he has to advocate. His advocacy has the same risk as my advocacy of being bad because it is used in a bad way, which means at best the genealogies are the same. We both link and we both have harms, but that doesn't mean you negate. So, he's not extending in the NR, he doesn't extend this turns the AC argument from the counterplan, which means there's no reason to believe that it turns the AC. So all I need to do is win the AC at this point. There are two defensive reasons extended off of the counterplan that you're not voting. The second one is very little responded to, and it's clearly articulated as to why that's not a good reason to vote. So the first reason he could win on the AC is the hold argument. But the warrant for the hold argument within the NC was hold is an active verb, and regard is not an active verb. But insofar as that is not true, his argument isn't true here. There's a new warrant in the NR about hold being about regarding being a different action than hold. That's not the same thing as was in the NC. So that argument doesn't win in the round. The second argument is the second argument on the case proper. He says that even if morality applies this way, that we're not punishing, and this doesn't give you a reason that it applies to all actors. But that's very clearly responded to in the 1AR. Insofar as freedom always determines our conceptions of morality, and there is only one overarching conception of morality, then freedom determines which standards they will be held to, and they should be held to the same standard if they have the same level of freedom. So you can extend Schopenhauer. They say they have the same level of freedom because they're dependent on their deliberations. Their motives decide their will, which means the will is absolutely determined by motives. This has two impacts. The first is that it wins me the round on the AC level. The second is that it denies the truth of anything in the value-inclusive counterplan. They do not have in any sense choice because individuals are determined by their motives, which means that far from social context determining them, they're determined by their own mind. If individuals do not have choice, then there's no reason to believe that there is a harm. This is the argument about the double bind. This is the second argument. This specific warrant is not responded to. Insofar as there's no harm to treating individuals who do not have freedom as though they did not have freedom, then there's no reason to believe that the counterplan is a net benefit. So on that level, the counterplan is not a net benefit. Schopenhauer establishes that they need to be treated the same based on freedom because freedom is always the way that people have been treated based on morals.
On a 3-2 decision, the winner is the negative from Greenhill.
I'll start. I sit. I'm really uncomfortable voting on. To me, frankly, I think the only issue that you really have going into the 2N is this hold argument. And I'm really uncomfortable voting on a topicality argument that I don't necessarily think has impact or like some sort of like argument why I need to vote like some sort of standard or reason to prefer that particular interpretation. And I think that the way that you're articulating the argument in our not in terms of like the link of the argument, but like the implication of that argument as being like a voting issue, I think is different. I think that if you're going to talk about why his interpretation is unfair or and that's a voting issue itself, that's one thing. But I have a really difficult time voting on that argument. With that said, I think that you're not really getting under his arguments as to why the case advocacy per se just doesn't link. Like I don't think that the perspective offered by the 1AC at all per Nietzsche and Schopenhauer I don't think that they perceive morality or the self in the same concept as the criticism that would be a net benefit to the counterclaim does. And I think that an argument that I think is not being really answered very well is the argument about gender space, and that the term person has a real world, the term individual has a real world sort of implication, because we're now trying to find some abstractions from struggles that are happening in terms of gender as gender identity, as opposed to sort of like a concept of the rational human self or whatever. And I think when that argument isn't really being dealt with, I feel like the advocacy at the very minimum of the VIC is pretty hollow. And so I feel like given the extension of Schopenhauer, that there is a pretty substantial benefit to having no restriction.
So I also affirmed. Michelin explains why I don't deal with why it's not necessarily to vote off the two things that are off the AC, the first and second neg voters. And so in terms of the actual arguments on this discourse argument, and then by the negative, I think that first of all, I don't think that he's exactly linking, because of the arguments that Schopenhauer and Nietzsche aren't part of the modernist rationalist logic, and in fact are directly working against that, right? I mean, I think you do have a sort of response that the connotation still exists in our minds, sort of, maybe because of individuals, right? But I still think that his original argument is, you can't blame me for doing this because my authors and my conception of the word individual are actively against that. And so in the sense where you're, at that point, all you can link to really is the resolution, we can't blame him or vote him down for that. So that means that he's not exactly linking. But then there's also a second part of sense of doubt that I have on the bottom, where again, as Mishan said, you're linking yourself and you're using person. And so maybe person, it doesn't abstract in exactly the same way, right? But your argument is that you 100% solve, right? And that's why this is such a good idea to go with this. But apparently, since persons, is also used as a tool of abstraction, it's not really that much of a great advantage, right? And at least persons, can be. It's clear that persons can be used to abstract. And then also, I think your extension of the etymological argument is just not very good, right? That the etymology is ethical, right? But I mean, no one who uses that word now has any sort of idea of where it came from, right? And I think it's a fair argument to say that over 4,000 years, connotation is lost, right? Especially, that seems very, very obvious that even though authors often do trace that kind of thing, and even within maybe in academic circles, it has a sort of nuance. In the sort of discourse that we care about, it does not. So at that point, either he's not really linking, and you seem to be actually linking, and there's offense coming off the AC, so that seems fine, and that seems a reason why I can affirm. And I just want to say one thing about the notion of the VIC in the way it's functioning this round. I get that you were not really annoyed, right? Because it's easy to dispel the response that it's not a discourse critique, but I still think I feel as if then you have to have either a clearer articulation that is the way it is working, not in a debate, not in the sense of being oh, well, this is a VIC, right? Because no one knows what that is, and it's only a thing that Greenhill does. It's not common, right? It's just you guys invented it. So what you need to do is explain why it's. It's a cool idea, right? But the point is
more than what observation 2 does, where it says this is a value inclusive counterclaim.
Yeah, you need to explain that it's what you're doing. The reason why I think it's problematic, I don't think that you do a poor job of explaining how it functions. What I think then happens, though, is that it's very weird, at least in LD, to think of the fact that you can negate by affirming with one different word, right? Like, that doesn't seem to be very fair affirmative ground. And so, like, I can see why people be like, well, that can't be what he's talking about. It's got to be some sort of discourse argument, right? And so I think you need to make it clearer that that's how this is functioning, because otherwise, and also maybe, you know, preempt against theory about that, because it seems really weird that, like, because you could also make some other seemingly minor change in the affirmative plan and be like, oh, well, now we negate. And that doesn't seem fair, right? Because then it seems like the substance of the affirmative arguments that are being granted, except for one minor distinction. And it's like, then why would I ever say that the affirmative is like, whatever the ballot says, like on the whole, you know, not true? It seems to be more true than not, just with the exemption of this one thing. Because like, as opposed to, you know, in policy where like everything that is not the affirmative would be negative ground, there's still a kind of defined hazy negative ground penalty. So, I mean, that's why the Vic to pick analogy like isn't, you know, one-to-one.
I kind of agree with that. I like don't mean to cut short, but like there is one point in your in R, I guess, where you say something like, think of this more like policy, you know, and I'm thinking like, yeah, it's a value inclusive counterclaim, but where was the 1AC plan, right? And it just seems like there's a little bit of lack of clarity in terms of how the VIC can function absent a clearer, you know, it's not how does the VIC function vis-a-vis what the affirmative just did, it's how does the VIC function in terms of like common expectations about LD theory and what an LD resolution means as opposed to a policy topic. Does it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't vote on either of the two arguments on the AC. I voted off of the VIC, which I think maybe we should call it a value-inclusive counter-advocacy to get out of the plan problems. I really like this debate a lot. The reason I like this debate is it's very clearly about links. The first sort of level of link story is, you know, can you, through this sort of Schopenhauer, get out of the link to the value, include the VIC, right? And I don't think you do, for me, because I think that the sort of, first of all, I see the VIC as functioning as the resolution establishes a statement that's very specific evidence about the sort of, you have a meaning, and I don't think that you're doing enough work to escape that meaning. I don't think that all of the usages of the word individual in your case are immediately bound by sort of, you know, you're going to immediately just bind them in the Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and I'm not well versed enough in philosophy to say that, to give you that sort of, do that work for you. At the same time, I also don't think that you link into the VIC, even though I think it's a very smart argument about the persons, and persons sort of destroying ground projects, I certainly don't think there's enough work for it to be comparatively as clear with the evidence as the sort of individual stuff is, and so like I prefer that, and I thought it was very well done. I think that I think that the sort of ground skew assumptions, you know, like, I mean, I think that if that argument was made in the round, I mean, I think you would have had a lot of answers to it, I suspect.
Yeah, that's what the minute of Vic's good was for.
Right. So I mean, I thought it was a very good round, and it was a great round, and I don't want to keep you from your flight.
I guess the way that I start on the Vic, I also didn't vote on the AC arguments, but I think that the important kind of starting point for me is the observation 4, which says that the Vic solves 100% of the case, so all I need is a risk of the impact on the Vic. So I think then immediately, even if you're winning the sort of first two arguments you go for on the Vic, that you're first essentially no link because you don't use, or Nietzsche and Schopenhauer don't use that conception of individuals, and then there's no harm. I mean, those are very defensive arguments that might mitigate the full extent of the Vic, but at the very least, it is not an offensive reason why you are better solving for the implication. So, however, on each of those arguments, I think the first one, I didn't understand the Vic to be, I understood there to be two levels of the link, a resolutional link and also a link to the AC text. So even if you were separating out of the second one, I'm not sure that deals with the first. I don't understand his argument to be a discourse case, so you know, I think regardless of how you contextualize individual is maybe not particularly relevant. On the second argument about how there's no harm to treating unfree people as unfree, the warrant for that is dependent on the extension of the argument out of your contention that says it deals with motivation. I think the 2-1 is pretty specific in saying, regardless of if you choose your moral code, you nonetheless have ground projects. I think you needed to question the value of ground projects if they're not being chosen, given that this would be a, you know, as I said, a defensive argument. I'm not comfortable inserting that for you. Now, the place I got closest to rejecting the Vic and voting affirmative is on the third argument that the 2AR goes for, the sort of abstraction for persons versus individuals. Now, the way I end up understanding this discussion, and the problem I have is that the discussion isn't abstraction good, abstraction bad. It should be the harms that come from abstracting the term individuals, i.e. the destruction of ground projects, versus the benefits of abstracting persons, i.e. solving for gender struggles. That comparison's not really done, so I feel like the most developed argument that I'm getting is coming from the ground projects argument, since it's not really until the 2N that you even really say solving for gender struggles. In the 1N, I have you saying, well, person is a way of abstracting he, she. There's not really a lot of normative import that I get from that in the 1N, so that's why I vote negative.
Briefly, it pained me to make this decision because the arguments you make in response to what the NC I entirely agree with, especially in response to etymology. I think it would have been useful to expound on that a little bit more later on. As far as the RFD, I think it's 100% what Josh said, with one exception in terms of dealing with the Nietzsche connoting individual in a different way. I think that David is making an argument earlier on that's saying, which is that because based on your argument that we are no longer children and that our formations of morality have already been established, he's saying that that is also an answer to the Nietzsche argument. And then likewise, I deal with the second argument off of Selznick in much the same way Josh does. I also read the evidence which talks in particular about abstracting from a moral universe. And when you're talking about concrete struggle, there is a little bit lost in the translation there, but very, very close round, excellent debate.